Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Change Your Minds podcast. My name, of course, is Owen Fitzpatrick, and I'm delighted to be joined by a very good friend of mine, Mr. Adam Boyd. Adam has been training and consulting on sales with founders, owners, and individuals on sales and sales leadership since 2008. Several clients have had successful exits, though he's not claiming a direct correlation, but I would not be at all surprised. He's had two stints as a middle market executive leading sales, one time with a lot of success and luck, and another time with not very much of either. Most of his work now is with professional service providers such as attorneys, high-end consultants, those in real estate, finance, benefits, or wealth management. He loves helping those in highly competitive markets win more of the right clients through training. He survived the Action School of Business and read a lot of books at Rhodes College. He lives in the greatest country in America, Texas, with his wife, four kids, and a new dog. Adam, so great for you to be on. Thanks so much for joining me, mate.
Owen, it's great to be with you. I always enjoy a conversation.
So, look, we were presenting at the same mastermind, and you came after me. And one of the things that I was very impressed with was your style was really relaxed. I think you can tell even by your bio that you're a humble guy, but yet you're very successful in the work that you've done over the years. What I would love to do is I want to explore your approach and your style.
Yeah,
Before I do that, could
sure.
you give us just a quick background of how you found yourself in the position that you're in today, what you're doing today?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was in business school, and like a lot of people who go to business school, I was really trying to delay figuring out what I was doing. I thought that my fairy godmother would show up and tell me. And I looked around my class and I saw really sharp, talented, hardworking people, but they were all going into finance, marketing, and operations. And so I said, I'm going to go a different direction. I stumbled into a sales training business and I thought, I'll do this for 3 or 6 months while I'm continuing to find out what I'm going to do. And I ended up doing it for 9 years because we had some success, life changed. I changed a lot. I learned a great deal. And my work in that time has evolved. My knowledge base has evolved. I've added different tools and skill sets. I literally, like a lot of people, found this by accident. And I enjoy selling. I enjoy seeing people succeed. I enjoy ideas and getting to talk about business. So that's how I've gotten here. I had a little detour into middle market companies running them, but now I'm back working with others.
So you work with professional service firms, again, like
Yeah.
attorneys. What do you do for them specifically? If they come to you, what is it that you help them with?
So most people in professional services, they provide expertise. That's their product. And they believe that if I show you how smart I am, you will hire me. The problem is, and you and I were discussing this before we jumped into the podcast, we talked about differentiation. And what these folks don't realize is very often they're not differentiated at all in the mind of a potential client, whether it's commercial real estate, whether it's consultants have a better chance than a lot of other people, but marketing firms, law firms, they struggle to look, sound, and feel different to a potential client. And so what I do is help them develop the skill set and the way of engaging a potential client before they actually become a client. This isn't lead generation. This isn't some fancy buyer's journey. This is, how do you talk to somebody in a way that they discover you're the right solution for them? In short, I help them learn how to actually sell because it's a different skill set than actually performing the law or consulting sometimes. It's its own unique thing that they need to add to their talent stack.
So would it be fair to say it's kind of like turning a discovery call into a two-way discovery call? So the client talks to you and you get to learn about them, but in doing so, by you learning about them and asking the right questions, they discover themselves as to why you are the right person to work with and why you stand out. Is that fair?
That's fair. I a lot of times what I'll see people do is they'll show up and let's say it's law firms. An attorney will say, here's all these great things about me. Here are all these cases I've worked on. Here's where I clerked. By the way, no one cares where you clerked because most Americans can't name all 9 Supreme Court justices. And so you're providing them a bit of information that's irrelevant to them. They just know it's supposed to be important. And they do a lot of presenting and a lot of pushing rather than helping this person find the answer, they try to tell the answer. And they actually go in with a lack of curiosity about the other person's situation. And you would probably have some insight into this. I think people feel that when you're not really curious about what's going on there.
I think immediately the orientation that we have whenever we're looking for help is obviously we do want someone who knows what they're talking about, but we
Right.
need somebody who sees us, who hears
Yeah.
us, who's there for us because
Right.
there's no person I've met who goes to a service provider and thinks to themselves, my problem is the exact same as everybody else. We
Right.
always think, Adam, you've worked with a lot of people, but you haven't worked with me. I know you've helped people solve a lot of problems, but not my problem. Because
Right.
again, we're I suppose as human beings, we believe, well, if it was that easy, I would have figured it out, right? I
Right.
should have figured this out. So I need you to know all of the nuances and all the information so that you can help me with your expertise. So
Right.
instead of them wasting a lot of time, I suppose, talking about how great they are, which is really whether they do it directly or indirectly, the subtext or the text is, I'm really great. I'm the best lawyer. I'm the best
Right.
attorney. Really, what you're saying is turning it around and asking questions and showing that curiosity is actually more powerful.
It is, because I have a deeply held belief that people in almost any scenario they want to be understood and they want to be heard. No one's people are running around trying to get their needs met in so many different ways. And when you finally find someone who listens to you and shows an interest, it's incredibly powerful. I think Talleyrand, who I think he was England's foreign minister, was known as a great conversationalist, but he was known for just asking phenomenal questions and being really interested in people. This is going to be the breakdown of my classical knowledge. I'm going to run its course right there. But if I sit I've hired attorneys and I've heard them talk all about their background. Rarely did they ask a lot of questions about really what I was trying to do, what I was concerned about, how I was hoping they could help. If they would ask those types of questions, I would immediately open up. And I just assume an attorney's a good one. Right now, people listening to this may say, well, that's an ignorant statement. But a lot of times we go to professionals, people come to you. You've been an author or co author of 9 books, you've got letters behind your name. They assume you know what you're talking about. What they are looking for in that first conversation is, do I trust him? Do I like him? Do I feel a connection? And they can probably not even like you. You just need to be likable and somebody they feel connected with. And then I think the second thing that needs to happen in that conversation is they need to discover something, right? And you facilitate that. You've done it with me. But what I try to do when I'm talking to a client is help them discover something that they're not going to find on their own. Because a lot of times they're not asking those questions. It takes someone from the outside asking a simple question. Here's an example. One of the things that I teach clients to do when they're selling is to ask a series of questions around, what if this doesn't work out? What if it does? Right? Whatever someone's trying to do. A lot of people have rarely voiced potential outcomes and worked through the consequences of something working or something not. If they take the time and someone's willing to step them through it by asking the questions, not telling them, a light bulb goes off and they actually start to envision that and they connect with that emotionally, but they also will put numbers to it, what they could gain, what they could lose, what they stand to risk. And at that point, it starts to shift from I'm exploring this to I need to do something. So that's part of the discovery that you and I talked about.
For sure. And I think one of the things that I think I was mentioning to you as well is that when we look at the questions you ask, if you stop and you ask yourself, what's the purpose of the question? What will happen if you do this? Or
Right.
what is the upside of doing this? What's the downside of doing this? All of these questions are inviting the person into a conversation. As you kind of
Right.
mentioned, they presuppose you know what you're talking about because
Right.
once again, there is a case of thou do protest too much or thou do talk about how great thou
Othello.
are too much.
Right.
Sorry for butchering the classic
No,
Shakespeare.
I love it. I love
But
Shakespeare.
the key or the idea here is that instead of you talking about look how great I am, this and that and the other, sometimes whenever I hear people do that, even in speakers. So as a speaker, whenever I go to conferences, I'm doing keynote speeches, you have other speakers, And sometimes, I'll be fair, more men do this than women, but you have speakers that stand up there and they let you know in the first few minutes of all the things
Right.
that they do.
Right.
And if I'm ever doing that, if for whatever reason I'm trying to let people know, look, I know what I'm talking about, I got credentials. Let's say I don't get an introduction, I'm going to do it.
Right.
There's a phrase that they use, which is, and I've heard a few people say it, but it's like, I don't say these things to impress you. I say that to impress upon you and all this sort of stuff. And I listen to that, I'm like, no, right? You say it to impress me. And so if I ever do use that, which I rarely do, but if I ever do it, I say, I do say this to impress you. I want you to be impressed. Because if you're impressed, maybe you might open yourself up to the ideas that I have to share
Mm,
today. And it's
right.
that honesty, it's that authenticity, it's that like, there is no bullshit here. I'm going to tell
Right.
you it exactly as I see it. And the other way of doing that is to be like, let's not even talk about that. I'm going to ask
Right.
you questions, but I'm not going to ask you questions like I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm asking
Right.
you pointed questions about what matters to you, about what the future holds for you. And
Right.
I'm trying to trigger in your mind this future scenario. So I'm effectively helping you make better decisions. Is that
Right.
a fair enough appraisal?
That is, and I want to come back to what you'd said a minute ago in terms of I want to impress you. Let's say we're dealing with an attorney or a management consultant from one of the big three, McKinsey, Bain, or BCG. And I don't know a ton about how they sell, but if you're sitting down with those three, one of those three major consulting firms, or you're sitting down with an attorney, you already assign them a certain level of competence. What they need to do in that interaction is help you discover they're the right choice. But the problem is, it's usually done through blunt force trauma. Let me tell you, let me show you, I'm going to push this on you. Look at all the great things we've done. And when we start to brag, this has been my experience and what I've observed over 15 years and working with clients, it actually creates a wall. And for most people, one, it doesn't feel natural. Two, it starts to alienate when it's like, we're the right solution. I don't want to be pushing that I'm right solution. I want them kind of saying, I think you might be able to help me. To which I might just respond, well, do you want my help? It doesn't need to be any more forced than that. And you see this, like I've done a lot of work in enterprise selling. The salespeople there will talk a lot about overcoming objections, overcoming objections, overcoming objections. It's because the case was never built well in the first place. And so now later they're chasing it. Now, the one thing that I've learned to do, and I might need your help on putting the right framework around this after our podcast here, is tell stories in a way that demonstrate expertise without being alienating. It,
So, just in response to that, like just while I'm thinking of it, first of all, if you look at Donald Miller's story brand, right,
oh yeah,
is the marketing approach to story, great stuff. And in it, one of the elements is the guide. So you have a character,
yeah,
main character, who has an objective and blah, 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 and there's ups and downs and stakes and whatnot. But the guide is a character. And in the guide part of it, Donald Miller always says you need to have two things as a guide: authority and
right,
empathy. And so I guess what I'm hearing you say is that everyone's great at the authority. All you need to do is give a case study where you were
right,
a genius attorney and you did this and that and the other. That gives you the authority. But the missing piece there is empathy. It's this sense that you give to people where you go, I get you, I understand you. If you take Chris Voss in his book, Never Split the Difference, the
yes,
former FBI negotiator, he talks about tactical empathy, making the
right,
other person feel it like you've got authority, but you also understand where they're coming from. If you look at Cialdini, he talks about likability and similarity, and even the recent
right,
principle, unity. So, with all of these things, to me, they're all saying something very similar. When it comes to positioning yourself in terms of empathy, there's two real ways I think that people do this. So, one is you try to identify a commonality that the main character in your story has with whoever it is that you're talking to, so that they
mhm,
immediately connect. And by hearing the story, they go, oh, I'm in that place too. I can relate to the
right,
character. And the other
right,
thing is to make the main character in a story have a certain goal, an objection, an objective, a outcome that they want to pursue, and something stopping them from getting it, which pretty much defines most stories. Because intuitively, when we look at the world, we feel like we're the underdogs. We all know what it's like to want something and not to be able to get it. And so when
right,
you have a clear outcome, so when you share a story, I believe that the empathy And that, I suppose, curiosity in a story form comes by you relating to whatever you know is true for the other person. So I'd argue you can tell certain stories that you know will resonate just for most
Right.
people in that person's space. But if you're doing those great questions that you ask and you talk about these and you ask them questions, you could even in the story say, similar to yourself, they were feeling this and this and this. And
I think so. And here's what we do. People know they need to have empathy. And this is interesting. A client of mine yesterday had to have a very strong conversation with one of her direct reports. And this is a law firm. And she said, wanting to help people does not equal empathy. That your desire to be useful or to serve does not equal empathy. They still need to feel it. And a lot of people, what they'll do, they mistake trying in a very, the word's not desperate, but almost like a lunging way to connect, that they really just make it all about themselves. And what did I say? People want to be heard and understood. I think one of your gifts, I've seen you do this, is when you interact, you can tell a story, but you're deeply interested in the other person and they feel that. So I see people who sell, try to talk about their weekend and their interests and all of these things, desperately looking for connection when what they really need to do is just show interest. Now, I do want to circle back to this. But one of the ways that I know how to tell a story and one of the frameworks I give is to tell third party stories. Because what happens when we describe the types of challenges other people have had that are similar to them, the potential client will actually insert themselves into that story. And the more specific the story, even if it's vastly different, they will actually kind of gloss over those and look for the similarities and connect and start to open up. And this is one of the ways that professional service providers or anyone selling anything can demonstrate expertise is they don't even have to tell a fascinating case study, but what they can do, and again, you're somebody who does this really well, you've got the Jedi mind tricks thing,
yeah.
is they will say, let me tell you about some of the things that this person was dealing with, and you might pull some ideas from it. They were dealing with this, this, and this, and they started asking these questions. And these are questions you may want to be asking in your scenario. These things happened, and they were asking these questions. Now, I'm not Christopher Nolan, but there's a little bit of inception that happens there. I've actually opened a doorway for these people to start thinking about the questions I want them to think about that are similar to their business case. I've demonstrated expertise without having to push. I just told a story. I invited us into a conversation that's going to be about things that are deeply important to them. And I've done it without pushing. And now they feel connected because I've dealt with people like them. So that's my too long, don't read, back of the napkin way to do it.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much for sharing that, Adam. That's great stuff. And I couldn't agree more. I think your approach is absolutely marvelous. And I'm not surprised it gets great results. Let's do the quick fire round if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, favorite movie?
Braveheart.
Love it. They may take our lives, but they'll never have our freedom.
That's right.
Author, favorite author,
William Faulkner.
favorite book,
Oh, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
fantastic. Favorite artist?
Like musical artist?
No, 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 painter or a sculptor or something.
Oh, I mean, how do you beat Michelangelo's work like the David?
Yeah. Favorite musician?
Currently, it is Chris Stapleton.
Okay. Favorite philosopher?
Ooh, I've not spent enough time thinking about this. I'm going to be somewhere between Seneca, Aristotle, and Aquinas.
It's a good trio right there, mate. Good trio.
Yeah. Yeah.
Favorite TV series?
Oh gosh. Look, I'm in Texas. It was Friday Night Lights for a long time. I still get choked up if I go back and watch it.
If you could have any superpower?
Oh, flight. I don't
Love
think
that.
we think about how cold that might be. You get it too far up, but I would love to fly.
Fly. Yeah, well, that works. Ideal time travel. You could go to anywhere in the past, present, or future. Where would you go?
Oh, I don't want to go to the future. I would love to go to the past. I'd love to find out if Shakespeare was one person or more than one person and see who he was. It's just so
Conspiracy, huh?
yeah.
Alternative location. If you could live anywhere else besides the greatest country in America, where would you live?
I might live in a little village in Italy. I really would. Have a little farm. I have no idea how hard that would be, but it sounds great.
Food would be great. If you could do any other career besides what you're doing,
Oh god, I would just write novels and not deal with just write, farm, raise my kids,
I hear you. I hear you.
scratch out a
Go with
living.
the world. Yeah, I get you. I get you. And then lastly, one piece of advice, if you were to put a piece of advice for the world on a billboard, what would you say to the world, to just a message that exists forever for the world?
And I need to give you some credit for this. And I would probably iterate through this, but we have to live our lives. I don't get to live Owen's life. I don't get to live Jay-Z's life. I don't live my kids' lives. I live my life with my gifts, my set of options. And those aren't limiting, but the more we embrace that, the better off we're going to be. You've worked with me and helped me a little bit on looking at my situation and rethinking it rather than pining for some alternative or needing to envision it. It's create it. And so, but this is our life. And these are the things we need to live without comparing because it's the thief of joy.
Love it. Thank you very much, Adam, for this. Where can people learn more about you? Where can they go?
They can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm Adam P. Boyd, and they can go to my website, which may or may not be a work in progress, depending on when you find it. That's thenorthwoodgrp.com. Thenorthwoodgroup.com was taken, so we got grp.com. So thenorthwoodgrp.com.
Thank you so much, Adam. As always, an absolute pleasure, mate, and looking forward to seeing you soon again. But thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom with our listeners.
Thank you so much, Owen. It's been a pleasure.